All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Qumulex Radio. I am Josh, as always, is my co-host and friend, Aaron Newman. And today we have a very special guest, David Taylor from STid. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. I can't ever seem to decide if it's STID or STid, but I believe it is STid, right?
Yes, you can go STid or STID, either whichever you're
Oh,
feeling
you'll
at
take
that particular
both?
moment. I'll take
All
both of
right.
them.
Well, that's not going to help me. Now I'm really going to be messed up. So just give everybody that may not be aware of your product line, just a little brief introduction to you and STID, what you're all about.
Sure. First of all, I appreciate you guys letting me come in and hang out with you today for the podcast. So, STid or STID, depending on your feeling at the moment, is a access control manufacturer. We're based in the south of France, and we are a 27-year-old company. So, for those of you listening here in the U.S., you're probably going STid. Who are they? And that's not an uncommon reaction. However, we have been in business for quite a while, but we're newer to the US market. We've only been in the US for maybe 5 years now. And most of that was in a very small team format. So we've now kind of grown the name and grown the brand. So we're a little bit unique in that we just make readers. We don't make the entire system, which is why we are great partners with Qumulex is
Mhm.
because we provide the piece that we do well with the piece they do well, and together we make a great partnership. So um, from the U.S. perspective, we're based in Texas, and this which is where I'm at. And my name is David Taylor again. I'm the North American Director of Sales for the company. So we're very good at high frequency access control, and we provide people the opportunity to create configurations themselves and produce whatever type of system they need to go with whatever access control platform they might be utilizing.
No, that's great. So one of the things we were kind of chatting about before we hit the record button was kind of like the rise of mobile credentials. And I feel like it's been a thing we heard about for a number of years. I feel like with COVID, that even increased further. And I feel that there's a lot of momentum there with mobile credentials. So, I mean, is that what you're seeing? And why do you think that's happening?
Most definitely. And Josh, I have my own little point of view of the evolution of the mobile credential, which of course I'll be happy to share with you guys.
Yeah, it's an opinion show. How about
There you go.
it?
Exactly. So, technology, and I'm going to expand it beyond mobile credential, but specific to that, technology obviously in the security world is always advancing. From cameras, you went to analog, then you went to IP. So that was the next great thing. And it took a while to be adopted and people didn't understand it. But then once you hit the tipping point, it goes, and then it goes that direction. So that goes throughout security. And I think with access control, I think the natural progression away from a very heavy emphasis on physical credentials, we're moving to the next phase in technology. So what is that next phase? You have your biometric piece and you have your mobile credential piece, right? Those are the next natural evolutions. So I think even before the pandemic, even before COVID hit, to your point, talking about how that sped things up, I think there was already a natural progression going towards other forms of technology, more advanced technology, which again, biometrics and mobile. Then you had the pandemic, and then all of a sudden, it's no one wanted to touch anything, and it was
Right.
hands free. So it naturally escalated and increased the momentum of that movement through necessity. So how do you get away from physical credentials? You go to a fingerprint or facial recognition, or you go to a mobile credential. The challenge sometimes with biometrics is that it becomes quite costly, and it can be an expensive proposition to put a biometric on every single door. And it doesn't make sense in a lot of cases. You might have one in an entryway, but then you don't need it interior to the building, right? For instance. So what do you do? What are other options? Well, mobile credential kind of spills in there. So I think there was, again, a natural progression going towards that. And then you had the pandemic, with escalated it. And now you're looking at the rise of mobile credential, kind of like the rise of the Terminators or something, right? So my feeling on that is that it provides another option to be able to access doors, and then if you couple that with the fact that technology is getting better on the mobile, or excuse me, cellular phone side, right? Cell phones are getting smarter. You have the biometric piece within a cell phone, which makes everybody use their phones more, use them for more things. You now have the rise of the wallet. You have all of these different things. So mobile credentials within a phone is a natural progression. And now that that technology is getting more and more solid, the performance is stronger and stronger. And STid is certainly right in the middle of that. We have a very strong mobile credential offering, and I think it's the natural progression at the end of the day of movement.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I see a lot of that too. And I also have made Terminator jokes, and they didn't always land, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, trying to shoehorn it in there. We'll figure it out.
That was a little something special for me, and that is always appreciated. Yes, I mean, what type of end customers, like what verticals do you think are adopting this mobile approach faster, or do you think it is just completely across the board?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Josh, as far as who's using it. I think there's a little bit of it across the board, and some of the factors there, it's physical credentials are still, even though we're on that backside, thankfully, of the supply chain issue, physical credentials, I think, are still a little bit of a struggle, and we're having problems with certain chipsets for physical credentials. So I think you're seeing some mobile across the board. Again, the natural progression, but certain verticals are hitting it harder, and that's dependent upon the pricing structure of your mobile platform for certain instances. I know for us, with the way we do it, which is a little bit different than maybe some of the other guys, and a little bit of a unique approach, that I'm seeing it in verticals where you have a lot of users, right? So higher education comes to mind, universities utilizing mobile credential, because then you have the ability to cycle through the different classes of kids coming through, right? Your sophomores, juniors, seniors, and freshmen, and you're able to recycle is not the right word, because that makes it sound like you're getting rid of it, but you're able to repurpose credentials with the way STid does it, and you're able to limit your cost exposure, I think, is a good way to put it, in that vertical. But you're also seeing it in just general businesses with high turnover, that they need to remove credentials and reissue credentials or get new credentials. The problem with physical credentials is that some companies, especially if you've got, let's say, a university with all these kids, and we're talking about 22 to 18, they're not the brightest kids in the world from perspective of, they don't keep up with badges, and they don't keep up with this and that. Your physical credential inventory is probably a nightmare to manage. Kids lose them, they forget them, they graduate, they're not bringing them back, and things of that nature. If we're just sticking with universities,
they're not going to forget their phone. I mean, you'd
they're
have
not
to
going to forget
remove
their
it
phone
with a crowbar to get them to get that phone up. So
yeah, exactly. And in big commercial companies too, you probably have a person that their entire job might be managing the card credential or their card inventory, and trying to go back and grab these from employees that leave. Upset employees leaving aren't going to return their physical badges. They don't care. So it's going to a mobile solution simplifies the need to spend a lot of time, energy, and money on a physical credential inventory.
do you deal much with like government? I mean, do you think that they're more likely to hold on to that card credential approach?
Oh, most definitely. I think government, local government and federal government, military, things of that nature. A lot of these guys are not interested in mobile at all, because it's more about the physical credential. They're doing the PIV and the TWIC cards, and they want to see pictures of employees on the back on their shirts or whatnot. So yeah, I don't see it a big push in government. They're too hands off from a perspective of wanting to put that on a phone.
No,
I think they'll be the holdout,
right,
honestly. Yeah.
But I do feel that, they look to moving beyond, and many have already moved beyond from like the traditional wiegand procs approach. They're looking to get into something more secure. So I know you have a lot of thoughts and feelings about that. I mean, where do you see that evolution for those that need to stick with the physical credential? Where's that going, so that alleviates some of the concerns? Even though I did a whole episode of radio on a defense of wiegand, which was a little bit of a steel man, or what do they call it, a devil's advocate type of a discussion. Yeah. But I mean, in reality, I think people should be considering better, more secure formats. So what is out there for them, and why should they use that?
Completely agree. And first, I got to ask you and Aaron how much time you guys have, because I can go on about this topic for about 6 hours. So just
I have as much time as you're interesting. That's how the clock runs.
Yeah. So mobile's not ever going to be fully adopted. There's always going to be those cases, to your
Right.
point, with government, that it's not going to happen. So what do you do within that to strengthen that category? And you talk about wiegand. So wiegand is still very predominant here in the United States. It's I don't know the percentage, but it's got to be 80,
High.
85%
Yeah.
probably, maybe higher, that people are still utilizing wiegand. Well, outside of the US, it's all OSDP, or predominantly OSDP. I don't want to say
Really?
all, I can't speak, but it's like the progression from Europe to here. They tend to adopt things a little quicker than we do, because we're such a large country and we have so much going on and we do so much in that space. It takes us longer to adopt, I think. So if you do look at Europe, there's a lot of OSDP. They're already version 2. We're STid is the largest, I believe, the largest OSDP verified reader company out there. All of our readers are OSDP verified, which means that they've been tested and approved, and we can do version 2 OSDP, which the quick answer between what is wiegand and what is OSDP. Wiegand is a one-way communication, ones and zeros. You talk from the reader to the panel. You say, okay, Josh, Aaron, you guys can come in the door, or you cannot. OSDP puts it on steroids. Number one, it encrypts the communication. It can be two-way communication. You could actually push commands depending upon your level of integration and cooperation between the panel and the reader. You can actually push commands from the panel to the reader to tell it to do different things, depending upon what that integration looks like. So it's, we're always talking about the natural evolution, like I mentioned earlier. So wiegand is becoming, while still the most prevalent, it's not as secure as OSDP. So then you move to the OSDP cycle, and then we start utilizing that. And then, bad guys are always trying to find reasons to get into things, and that's why you see the progression. Wiegand it can be hacked into if someone tries hard enough. OSDP is more secure because it is encrypted two-way communication. So for those folks that are not going to mobile, they're looking for stronger ways to communicate. So you move to OSDP, and you look at higher frequency cards, badges, physical credentials, rather than the historic proximity 125 kilohertz cards. So you go there, and then you're able to encrypt data on a card versus having it readily readable on a prox card. So it all cycles, and it all moves forward. As the bad guys hack something, we make it smarter, and we keep it and we play with it until they hack that. And the bad guys are always trying to break into stuff. So we progressively get smarter, or think we get smarter, and increase our technology levels to try to combat that. Yeah.
My personal advocacy for not totally condemning wiegand has always been that it is far less expensive than the better technologies. And in my view, there's a place for the customer that says, look, we're Larry's CPA office, and we have 10 people, and we take our laptops with us, and we have a shredder and a printer, and we have an alarm system, we have cameras, we have wiegand locks. And if somebody wants in, they're more than likely just going to take the big metal trash can out front and throw it through the window and climb in. And I'd hate to see them go back to a physical key approach, meaning like an actual key that you would put in the lock, like traditional key at your house, kind of a key. I'd hate to see them do that, because they at least, for them, it's almost like a point of administration. I know who came and went. I can revoke credentials, and it's an amount of deterrence. But certainly, if you're very concerned about anyone cloning or gaining access in that way, I mean, I think the newer technologies make far more sense. And I think what I'm hearing from you is like the rest of the world's really kind of gone the OSDP route predominantly. Is that what, or you're seeing that more?
It seems to be, when I talk to the teams, across the pond, as they like to say, or my buddy in the UK, Gordon, likes to say, it does seem that OSDP is more prevalent, and certainly being utilized at a much higher level than here. And to your point, you're exactly right, Josh. And I think maybe Aaron and I spoke about this before, is that there's a time and a place for everything. Wiegand's not, wiegand certainly still functions and works perfectly fine, works awesome in certain situations. It is what we're seeing here is we are seeing it's more of the larger rollouts, the larger, higher level, or not even higher level, but just more secure heavy, projects where you're seeing the OSDP for sure.
Are you seeing, so I mean, we kind of said earlier in the podcast that we don't know the exact number. I think you'd probably have to get a consortium of everyone being honest to know what the real percentage is. And we're never going to get that. But we all kind of use that 80% ish number. And I think it's probably somewhere in the ballpark of reality of how much is vegan here in this country. I mean, are you seeing as proposals come in that there's a change in what is being proposed? Or do you still see 80% of the quotes, are they vegan?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and a lot of it depends on who you're talking to within an organization. If you're talking about a big partner, for instance, up at the top of the food chain, where all the IT guys are making the decisions for the company from a perspective of security, they're all pushing OSDP very heavily, and they're talking about we want to partner via an OSDP channel. But when you're talking to the guys that are actually out there doing all the work, and the guys are actually beating the streets and doing all the fun stuff of sales, it's still predominantly vegan. And so I haven't seen a shift. At least we haven't at STid.
What do
It
you think
still
is going to
seems to be
happen?
predominant.
I mean, do you think something will have to change that? Is how we work here, right?
Yeah,
Something
unfortunately,
happens,
yeah,
awesome or terrible, and
exactly.
everyone goes, whoa, and then we change. I mean,
That's exactly it. And you could multiply that out. We could have that conversation about waiting till something happens in so many different spots within this country. Right now, it's ridiculous. But yes, it is. It is a situation of we're very the U.S. security market is reactionary more than it is proactive. So it's going to take something, a big hack. It's going to take something happening to the just vegan in general. I think to kind
Price,
of to kickstart it a little bit more.
yeah, if the price, were to go up, just like analog cameras, I feel
Yep.
like it's the same kind of paradigm with analog cameras. It's like they're so expensive now. Now the integrators are forced to go IP, even though their preference may be just to plug that BNC into an encoder. The same with OSDP, you know what I mean? Like you have to have the know-how how to address these things, how to set baud rates, and some of the kind of like older school integrators might be a little bit resistant to that.
Yep.
you know
Yeah, I think you're exactly right as well. We're very set in our ways here in the US, and people are comfortable with what they do and they like what they do. And if it's working and they're not getting bit in the butt, why are they going to change it? So Aaron, you perfect point there is that people are used to it, and there's a lot of people resistant to change, as we all know. So yeah, it's a slow roll, and it'll either take something, or again, another excellent point that you just made is the cost factor. And here's my selfish STid plug is that our OSDP readers and our vegan readers are the exact same cost. There is no difference between the
no,
two.
that's great.
So if you choose to go OSDP, it's the same price point. We utilize them, both equally, from a perspective of how we price it. So the panels may still be a little bit more, the software may be a little bit more or whatnot because of the higher level of integration and the higher level of the ability to do things. But my selfish plug is that it's the same cost.
Yes, I mean, I think what I'm hearing is there are organizations that are larger, that probably have either a larger staff thinking about issues about, this isn't exactly cybersecurity, but they probably have a larger cybersecurity team and presence, and maybe
Right.
that bleeds over into the physical security where they're thinking about the concept of things can be hacked and can be cloned. And I suppose if you are a large revenue organization or trying to do something that involves a lot of trade secrets or information that is interesting, I mean, there are more odds of somebody that would prefer to sneak in rather than throw a brick like
Right.
they would at Larry's CPA office, and certainly
Yeah.
with government, right? So I mean, is government here in the US, I mean, obviously they are more secure. Are they using more of the OSDP approach, or do they do something very different?
Yeah, they're moving, I think, more towards the OSDP side. They're moving towards more secure, and because they can't go to the mobile, or a lot of times they don't do biometric as well. So what do you use for security? You have to have more security between the panel and the reader, right? How do you do that? OSDP. And then you also have to look at the differences of the reader and the card exchange. So you're going to high frequency cards, and they have the PIV and the TWIC a lot in that space. So that certainly covers that part of it. So yeah, I think it's all about security and what you have the ability to implement. And if you can't implement X, you have to find Y. So there you go. That gives you the option. And then I don't want to jump into it today. Maybe we can do a whole nother episode if you guys are interested, but STid has actually created our own security protocol, which is SSCP, which is OSDP with a little more oomph behind it, is the way I personally like to say it. So you have a little bit more flexibility. There's some more things you can do. Again, this is something that we created in Europe, so it's being utilized, and we have quite a few partners in Europe. Here in the US, it's still fairly new. It's being integrated slowly into partners that are in business here, as well as in Europe. So maybe we can talk another time about that. But SSCP is our version of OSDP. I like to say it's OSDP on steroids, the way I like to put it.
No, that was interesting. The other thing, maybe in that next episode when you come back, I thought was very, very interesting was the concept that I think would probably blow a lot of people's minds that don't deal internationally, would be the thought that we're the slow adopters.
Yes.
I mean, I would think most people here in America, especially me, I fly my American flag every chance I get.
Of course.
I'm uber patriotic. I always think we're the best and the brightest, but I mean, that's an interesting thing that you said. And I almost got this picture of, I always use silly ways to articulate things to try and be funny, but I always like to tell people, not eating the elephant all in one bite. And so do you think that there's some aspect of in Europe? I know they have the EU, but still you're talking about, it's like we're an elephant, we're a continent, and we're a country. And then we're the whole elephant in one bite. I mean, do you think that some of that is the fact that they're the elephant bites? It's a continent full of smaller countries, and it's kind of like states here tend to lead legislative action or changes because it's easier for them versus doing it at the national level for the whole country. So, I mean, you think they're kind of just the easier to swallow bites, they're able to move faster? Sometimes.
I completely agree with that assessment. I like the whole elephant thing. Yeah, we're a monster over here from perspective of the size of our country, right? Yeah. France, where we're based, is France itself is smaller than Texas, where I live. So you think about it from a size perspective. Yes, I think we're slower to adopt, not because we're behind. Obviously I'm a uber patriotic guy too, and fly my flag every chance I get. So,
you're in Texas. I mean, you can't be there.
I'm a Texan. So I'm native Texan,
native Texan,
born in Houston, Texas. So I've been here my entire life, but I think it does. You're exactly right. I think because they have smaller spaces and they have individual countries, and they're all incredibly intelligent people over there, as we all know. I think they're easy. It's more easy to adopt a new technology in a smaller space with a smaller population than it is to try to get us over here to change.
Well, that would explain why it seems like always something horrible has to happen, and then we all at once say, oh, we can't have that again, and then all of a sudden we react, and we don't take the initiative, unfortunately, because it's so hard to shift. Didn't mean to cut you off there, Josh, but it's so hard to shift the thought process. And to Aaron's point, and I said it earlier, I mean, the analog to IP camera world analogy is my favorite because I was in cameras at the time. But it's like you kick and you fight and you resist all the way up until that moment when you're finally like, dang it, all right, well, maybe I can look at it. And then it just goes that way, right? It was like, you want me to buy one camera that cost X when I can have 4 that cost this, right? And it takes them a while to understand that, while those 4 analogs do this one IP camera does all of this, right? And your megapixels, and you get into that side of it. So we just don't, we resist change because we're Americans, and damn it, that's what we want to do. We'll change when we're ready to change. From coast to coast, I feel like we are a collection of countries in a way.
Yes,
we are one country. I think most people here, see it that way, but we're all very different. We have different dialects, different accents, different cultures from place to place. I actually lived in Texas for a year, and I loved it. I actually didn't even want to come back to Ohio, and but it's a very different life, a very different culture down there than versus up here in Ohio.
Most definitely.
And so, we are one big thing. but then we're also not. So I mean, I feel like that makes it harder. But the last, I know you have another engagement coming up, so
No
I don't want
worries.
to extend you too much farther.
No
But
problem.
the last thing that I wanted to ask then is, I still feel like one of the ways that change happens in this country is we have all the architects and engineers that are specifying for government customers, for the educational, for new commercial construction, K-12. Sometimes I don't think it always happens this way, but sometimes I think they kind of lead the way too, because they're forcing people to use something based on what they think is the best practice, and then they get accustomed to it. Of course, the more of anything that's out there, usually the cost comes down. I mean, do you see an effort from the A&E community to try and propose OSDP or other more secure formats to kind of help move this along, or do you think that they're still kind of stuck in the procs train as well?
That's an interesting question, and I'll be quite honest, it's not one that I've examined really close enough to give a great answer for. I think you probably, and this is just me hypothesizing again, I haven't dug into it, but I think you probably have a little bit of if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality in that space. I could be wrong, but if wiegand seems to be working right, and that seems to be predominantly what's out there, I think you're still seeing probably a lot of wiegand spec. I'm trying to think back to the last few proposals I've looked at, and I don't recall there being an inordinate amount of movement to OSDP, but it could just be the ones I was looking at,
I
right?
mean, do you see that, Aaron? Do you see any change?
I
Is it all
agree.
wiegand?
There's specs out there that are still wiegand. So yeah, it's a glacier in terms of change and that mindset. But yeah, I mean, it on a takeover, right? Like you kind of have the option. You can go from 6 wires to 4 on going from wiegand to OSDP. That's not a big deal. But yeah, it doesn't make sense to me, especially from a consultant standpoint. Why would you spec out running a 6 conductor versus just a 4? That doesn't. Yeah, it's still kind of like a mind-boggling affair internally for me. But I don't know why. I don't know why they haven't shifted.
And that's another great point, Aaron, that you're making there with the wiring. If you're talking about a takeover or a upgrade, it's not always easy to go back in and pull cable. And while you can do some things to send a more secure signal over a wiegand thread, we actually have what we call our decoders that you can put on the panel that helps secure between the reader and the panel more of an OSDP connection and more secure than a wiegand connection. So there's things you can do with existing infrastructure, but it's still not the easiest thing to do. It's not the most cost effective when people can just go back and throw more wiegand in there. So to Josh's point earlier as well, I think it depends on the scenario. If you're talking about a little one-man shop or a small shop, then it doesn't necessarily make sense to make that change to add a decoder or rerun wire. I think if it's a greenfield situation, I think you're probably seeing a lot more OSDP being spec.
Okay.
But I think if it's a takeover or something to that effect, to Aaron's great point he brought up, you're probably seeing them stick with wiegand. That makes sense.
So the part that I was missing in there a little bit, as the less intelligent guy on the call, I was almost hearing that wiegand takes more conductors than OSDP.
Yeah.
So is there a challenge if you've wired for wiegand? Are you then able to very easily utilize OSDP, or the fact that you loop them, does that make it a wiring challenge?
Both. I mean, the advantages of OSDP are, yes, it's less conductors, and you can daisy chain the devices, because then they have like an internal logical address. So, you have an end of line, each reader comes in as a different address. So that definitely assists when it comes to, pulling cable and efficiency, from a design perspective. Absolutely. So yeah, to David's point, greenfield, you're going to see that more. But yeah, from a takeover perspective, the one-to-one relationship with wiring, because like you have a reader out in the field, you have that wiring coming back to a panel, you could at that moment decide to then daisy chain, run new wire and daisy chain to adjacent doors, or you could just stick with that one-to-one relationship where it's all kind of like the hub and spoke coming back to your access control panel.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's decisions that can be made on the fly, for sure. But yeah, from a design perspective, it's still kind of 50-50.
That's the same idea about like over the door controllers where, you know, I think sometimes anyone that's not been an integrator or doesn't really understand what goes into the pricing or the cost of a project will think, well, we should be 100% at the door. Why is anyone, you know, and they don't understand that, well, that one Cat 6, if you've already wired the other way and you're doing a takeover, that doesn't actually save any money. So, I mean, I think that probably has an impact on, you know, how things are adopted. So
I would agree. I think it's all situational, and you know, you got to look at the environment and what's going on and what you're trying to accomplish, I guess, and the importance of getting crazy on a wiring situation or not wiring, or, you know, rewiring, or it just all depends upon what your environment is, I guess.
no, that makes total sense. Well, guys, this was actually a really fun episode. I think we covered a lot of interesting things, and I got to hear my second Terminator joke in the last month. So I really
I'm
appreciate
glad I could help out.
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean,
whatever I can do to help the ball club. I appreciate you guys inviting me on. It was
Yeah.
fun. I don't mind being a third wheel anytime you guys need it. So if you ever need
Yeah.
me to come back and talk a little bit more, I'll be happy to do so. It was a blast.
We'll definitely have you on again. And thanks to Aaron for joining in as he normally does when he's available. Aaron's quite a busy guy, always in demand. And for everybody else, thanks for watching. You know, check us out at Qumulex.com. Check out our YouTube channel, you know, with all these videos as well. And we're definitely pushing the social media a little harder. So if you see us out there, like and subscribe so you get all the great updates from us, you know, like you would with this podcast that will be coming out today. So thanks again, David, for joining us, and for everybody else, thanks a bunch, and we'll see you next time.